My nephew showed up at my door on a Thursday night with a duffel bag and a story about a landlord who'd lost his mind. 3 weeks later, he was still in my guest room. 6 months after that, I was sleeping with my bedroom door locked. But that Sunday morning, I was in the kitchen at 6:15, and I was making the biggest breakfast I'd cooked in 30 years. Waffles from scratch, sausage links, fresh squeezed orange juice, a pot of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I set the table with my late wife Margaret's good dishes, the white ones with the green ivy around the rim that she'd ordered from a catalog in 1987, and never let anyone use except on Christmas. 4 place settings. My nephew came downstairs at 7:45. His hair was unwashed. He had on the same flannel shirt he'd been wearing since Wednesday. He stopped in the doorway and looked at the table, and his face did something I'd been waiting months to see. First confusion. Then that slow, ugly smile. "Well, look at you," he said, pulling out a chair and dropping into it like he owned it. Finally decided to act right. He reached across the table and grabbed a waffle off the stack before I'd even sat down. "Maybe this is how it should have been all along," he said, mouthful. "You taking care of me instead of the other way around." I sat at the head of the table, poured my coffee, didn't say a word. He was still chewing when the doorbell rang. He looked up. "Who's that?" I set my cup down, stood slowly. Someone I invited. At 7 in the morning? Dad, who? He caught himself. "Who is it?" I walked to the front door. His chair scraped behind me. I put my hand on the knob, turned it, and opened the door. Standing on my porch were 3 people. When my nephew came up behind me and saw their faces, he made a sound I will never forget for the rest of my life. Like the air went out of him all at once. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You deserve to know the whole story. Let me go back. Let me tell you who I am, and let me tell you how the nephew I helped raise became the thing I feared most in my own home. My name is Gerald Booth. Everyone calls me Gary. I'm 68 years old, born and raised in Lubbock, Texas, 4th of 5 kids, retired after 31 years driving 18-wheelers across this country. I know every interstate from here to Portland. I know what it means to be tired in your bones and still keep moving. I built this house on Clover Street when I was 42, paid it off at 57, and I have never owed a single person a single dollar in my adult life. That matters to me more than most things. Margaret passed 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to the end. I was with her every day of those 8 months, slept in the hospital chair more nights than I slept in our bed, held her hand when she stopped knowing who I was. We had no children. It was just us for 39 years, and then it was just me. We had her nephew, though. My nephew by marriage, Danny Colton. His mother was Margaret's younger sister, Patrice, who died in a car accident when Danny was 11. Margaret practically raised him from that point forward. He spent every summer with us in Lubbock, every Thanksgiving, most Christmases. I taught him to change a tire, took him to his first Rangers game. When he graduated high school and didn't have money for the deposit on his first apartment, I wrote the check without being asked. Danny was 34 when he showed up that Thursday night. He'd been living in Austin, working in sales for some software company he'd been with 6 years. He told me the landlord had sold the building. New owners wanted everyone out. He just needed 3 weeks to find a new place. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because he was the last piece of Margaret I had left. Because when he smiled a certain way, he looked just like her. 3 weeks became 6. 6 became 12. I told myself he was having a hard time with the rental market in Austin. I told myself he was grieving too in his own way, that he'd lost Margaret almost as hard as I had. I made excuses the way you do when you love someone and you don't want to see what's right in front of you. The first sign came about 2 months in. It was a Saturday mid-afternoon, and I was out in the garage sorting through some of Margaret's storage boxes. Things I hadn't been ready to deal with before. Her cookbooks, her yarn, a shoebox full of cards she'd saved over the years. Birthday cards, anniversary cards, notes I'd tucked into her purse before long hauls. Danny came into the garage. Didn't knock, just walked in. Stood there watching me. "You're not seriously keeping all that," he said. I looked up. Some of it. Gary. He said my name like I was being slow. She's been gone 4 years. You need to let this stuff go. I set the shoebox down. Danny, these are my wife's things. She was my aunt. His voice had an edge I hadn't heard before, or maybe hadn't wanted to hear, and I'm telling you, this isn't healthy. You're living in a museum. I didn't answer. He stood there another moment, then turned and went back inside. I sat in the garage for a long time after that. Something in my chest felt different, like a gear had slipped somewhere, but I told myself it was grief talking. His grief and mine both. I was wrong. By month 3, Danny had stopped looking for an apartment. I knew this because I'd asked him twice and gotten 2 different vague answers about applications and wait lists in a market that was impossible right now. He was still paying nothing toward the utilities. He ate what I bought. He left dishes in the sink and expected them to be washed when he came back. He had a woman over twice without telling me. And both times I found out because I woke up to voices at 1 in the morning. I said something about it the second time. Politely, I knocked on the guest room door in the morning and said I'd appreciate a heads up when he had company overnight. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm a grown man, Gary. I don't need to check in with you." "This is my house," I said, "and you've been letting it sit here like a tomb for 4 years," he said. "Maybe some life in it isn't the worst thing." He closed the door. I stood in the hallway and thought about Margaret. About what she would have said. She would have handled this differently. She always knew how to reach him. But Margaret wasn't here. And whatever I had been able to reach in Danny was getting harder to find. The drinking started, or I started noticing it, around month 4. He'd always had a beer or 2 in the evenings. That was normal. But somewhere it shifted. Bourbon after dinner. More bourbon. Coming in late some nights smelling like a bar. Loud when he thought I was asleep. One morning I counted 4 empty bottles in the recycling bin that hadn't been there 2 days before. I said nothing, because I kept thinking of that 11-year-old boy at his mother's funeral, holding Margaret's hand so hard her fingers went white. Because I kept thinking, he's drowning, and you're the only one left who can pull him out. I was wrong about that too. Month 5. A Tuesday evening, mid-October, I was at the kitchen table paying bills, just the lamp on. Quiet house. Danny came in around 10. I heard him in the entryway, the thud of his keys hitting the bowl too hard, a shuffle that wasn't quite steady. He came into the kitchen, leaned in the doorway. His eyes were glassy. "Still up?" he said. "Just finishing the bills," I said. He looked at the envelopes on the table. Then he looked around the kitchen. His expression changed into something I didn't have a name for yet. "You know what's wrong with this house," he said. I didn't know anything was wrong with it. Everything's exactly the same as when she died. He waved a hand at the walls, at the calendar Margaret had bought at the church sale, at the little wooden rooster on the windowsill she'd picked up at a flea market in New Mexico in 2014. "You act like if you keep everything exactly the same, she's going to walk back through the door." "Danny, she's not coming back, Gary," his voice rose. "She's gone. And you've turned this whole house into some kind of shrine, and then you wonder why I can't breathe in here." I stood up slowly. "I think you need to go to bed. I think you need to wake up." He stepped into the kitchen, and something in his posture shifted. Something that made the back of my neck go cold. "You know what Aunt Margaret told me once? She said you were the most stubborn man she'd ever met. Said you'd rather be wrong for 30 years than admit it once." My jaw tightened. She also stayed married to me for 39 of them, because she was a saint. He pointed at me. "You're not. You're just a lonely old man who can't let go. And instead of dealing with it, you just sit here. And you let this house rot around you. And you let me sit here too, because you don't know what else to do with yourself." The room went very quiet. "You need to sleep this off," I said. "Don't talk to me like I'm a child. Then stop acting like one." He moved fast. His hand came down on the kitchen table with a slam that sent the stack of envelopes skidding to the floor. The lamp shook. I flinched and took a step back, and I hated myself for flinching. But I did it. "Don't. His voice was low now, which was somehow worse. "Don't you ever talk to me like that again." He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he turned and went upstairs, his door shut hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood in the kitchen and picked up the envelopes from the floor one by one. My hands were steadier than I expected. But when I sat back down and looked at the lamp, Margaret had picked that lamp out at an estate sale in 2009, paid $12 for it, said it was the perfect amount of warmth. Something moved through me that I hadn't felt in a long time. Fear, not of Danny exactly. Fear of what he was becoming. Fear of what I was allowing. I didn't sleep much that night. Around 3 a.m, I got up and went to my workshop. I have a small one off the garage. Nothing like I'd have if I'd ever had the time to properly set it up, but enough space for a workbench, some tools, a stool. I go there when I can't settle. Always have. I sat at the workbench in the quiet, and I thought about what had just happened. And then I thought about a conversation I'd had with my buddy Hector 6 weeks earlier. Hector Ruiz. We drove together for 11 years before he retired. 67 years old, sharp as he ever was, lives 20 minutes from me in Slotin. He'd stopped by in September, taken one look at me and said, "Gary, you look like a man who hasn't slept right in 2 months. What's going on in that house?" I'd told him. "Not everything, but enough." And Hector had said something I'd tried to put out of my mind since. "You document everything, but enough." And Hector had said something I tried to put out of my mind since. "You document everything. Anything that happens in your own house, you make sure there's a record. You hear me? Don't just hope it gets better. Make sure you can prove what's real." At the time, I thought he was overreacting, sitting in my workshop at 3 a.m. after Danny had slammed his hand on my kitchen table and stood over me like a threat. I wasn't so sure anymore. I opened the cabinet under my workbench. I keep a lot of things in there. Tools, spare parts, the logbook I used to maintain on the road, and in the back, still in the box that came in, the home security camera system I'd bought 2 years ago after a string of break-ins on our street and never gotten around to installing. I took it out of the box. I'm not a tech person, never have been, but I spent the next hour and a half reading the instruction manual by lamplight, and by the time the sky started going gray, I had one camera installed inside the kitchen, angled toward the table, connected to my phone. Small enough that you wouldn't notice it unless you were looking, tucked up near the cabinet where Margaret used to keep her mixing bowls. I pressed record, walked to the other side of the kitchen, spoke at normal volume, came back, played it, could hear every word. I labeled the first clip in my phone, October 14. Backup only. Hope I never need it. I was wrong about that too. The next 3 months were a slow education in what a person becomes when there are no consequences. Danny drank more. He yelled more. Not every night. Some nights he was almost like himself, like the kid who used to sit at our kitchen table doing homework while Margaret made dinner. And those nights were the cruelest in their own way, because they made me keep hoping. But other nights he came home loud and mean, and the things he said lodged in my chest like splinters. That I was the reason Margaret had never been truly happy, that I'd dragged her all over the country on my schedule and never once thought about what she wanted, that I was a selfish old man who used her memory as an excuse not to live. Some of it was drunk talk, words that didn't mean anything. Some of it, I suspect, was things he'd been carrying for a long time, and the bourbon just opened the door. I recorded it. All of it. A clip here, a clip there, the camera catching whatever happened in that kitchen. And I started lying. Not about anything important, just the small social lies that keep the world thinking everything is fine. I stopped going to Saturday breakfast with Hector and our friend Roy at the diner on Avenue Q. I stopped inviting my neighbor Connie Marsh over for coffee the way I used to once a week. When Pastor Aldred at the church asked me how things were, I said fine, just been a little under the weather. It's shameful, the hiding. I understand that now. But I want to be honest with you about why I did it. I was 68 years old. I'd spent my whole life being a man who handled his own problems. A man who didn't need help. And somewhere underneath all the practical reasons, don't cause drama, don't embarrass Danny, give him time to turn it around, was this quieter voice saying, if you admit this is happening, you have to admit you let it happen. And I wasn't ready to say that out loud. February changed things. A Tuesday night, a little past midnight. I'd been in bed, not sleeping, just lying there listening to the house, the way I'd gotten into the habit of doing. I heard Danny's truck, heard the door, heard him in the kitchen, the refrigerator opening, something being set down hard, then footsteps on the stairs. My door handle moved. It was locked. I heard him try it again. Then a long silence. Then his voice through the door, low and flat. Locking your door now? In your own house? A pause. You're scared of me, aren't you? I didn't answer. That's rich, he said. That is really rich. He stood there a few more seconds, then I heard him go to the guest room. His door closed. I lay in the dark with my heart going about twice its normal speed, and I thought about my father. He died when I was 44. Good man, quiet man. Spent his last years in a house where my older brother treated him like a burden he'd been saddled with. My brother wasn't violent, not with his hands, but there are other ways to make a person feel small. And my father never said a word to anyone about it. Not once, just took it. I used to wonder how he could do that, how he could let someone treat him that way and say nothing. I wasn't wondering anymore. I got out of bed, got dressed, went downstairs and out to the workshop. Sat at my bench. The house was quiet. The camera on my kitchen cabinet was dark. I picked up my phone and I scrolled through the clips. Watched them with no sound on, just the image. Saw myself in my own kitchen, backing up, flinching, trying to make myself smaller. Saw Danny standing over me, hands on the table, face red. I set the phone down. I thought about Margaret, about what she would say if she could see this. Margaret was not a soft woman. People always thought she was, because she was kind, because she laughed easily, because she made everyone around her feel like the most important person in the room. But she had a spine made of something harder than most people's. She would not tell me to give him another chance. She would tell me that love and allowing yourself to be harmed are two different things, and I ought to know the difference by now. I picked up my phone again. First call, Hector Ruiz. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he hadn't been asleep either. Gary. Hector, I need to ask you something. Ask. You told me back in September to document everything. I did. I've got months of it. Video. Clear as anything. I stopped. I need to know what to do with it. Silence. I need to know what to do with it. Silence. Then, you need to call Carl. Carl Whitmore. 30 years in law enforcement, retired Lubbock PD, now running a small private security consulting firm. We'd met through Hector a few years back. Good man. Steady. I know what this cost you, Hector said. I know what you're thinking about right now. But Gary, you call Carl. Tonight. It's past midnight. So it is. He didn't say anything else. I called Carl Whitmore. He answered on the fourth ring, voice rough but alert. Gary Booth, I said. I'm sorry for the hour. Talk to me. I told him, briefly, plainly. The same way I'd have reported a problem on the road. Stick to the facts, no editorializing. Carl didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, How many clips you got? 11 or 12, that matter, and a clean one from last November that I'd called the worst before tonight. Has he touched you? I hesitated. He's put his hand on the table hard enough to move things. He blocked a doorway twice when I tried to walk away. He tried the door handle on my locked bedroom an hour ago. That's enough. Carl's voice was firm. That's well past enough. Gary, I want to come over tomorrow morning, early, 7 o'clock. I'm going to bring a friend from the DA's office. Carl, I don't want to overreact. You're not overreacting. His voice was patient, but left no room. You're a 68-year-old man who's been living scared in his own house for months. That's not a family problem. That's a crime in progress. You let me come over tomorrow and we'll do this right. I said yes. Then I sat in my workshop until the birds started. I didn't sleep. I planned. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it like I did everything else in my life. Methodically, with dignity. I was going to make breakfast. I got up when the sun broke. My back ached from the stool. I went inside, took a shower, put on my good shirt, The blue button-down Margaret always said made me look like I was somebody. And my clean slacks. I put on my watch, the good one, the Seiko, that I'd bought myself the year I paid off the mortgage. Then I went to the kitchen, and I cooked. Waffles, because Danny had always loved Margaret's waffles, and she taught me the recipe 20 years ago, and I'd never made them for anyone since. Sausage links, fresh orange juice, a pot of coffee. I set the table with Margaret's ivy dishes and her good cloth napkins. 4 places. I was not hiding what was about to happen. I was marking the occasion. Carl arrived at 7:05. Hector came with him. I hadn't expected that, and I had to look away for a second when I saw him on the porch, because something in my chest loosened in a way I hadn't been ready for. The third person was a woman named Andrea Solis, assistant district attorney, compact and calm with a leather folder under her arm, who looked at my face when I opened the door and immediately said, "Mr. Booth, are you all right?" "I'm all right," I said. "Come in. Breakfast is ready." I led them to the kitchen. Carl's eyes went straight to the camera above the cabinet. He gave me a small nod. Hector sat in the chair to my left. Carl stood near the window. Andrea Solis took the chair across from mine, opened her folder, said nothing, waited. I told them about the clips. I walked through what I had, chronologically, from October through last night. I showed Carl the camera feed on my phone. Andrea made notes without reacting. When I finished, she looked up. "Mr. Propple, Booth, based on what you've described and what you've shown us, this meets the threshold for criminal threatening and harassment under Texas law. If he's been blocking your exit when you've tried to leave a room, that's false imprisonment. The bedroom door incident last night, combined with the documented pattern. That's enough." "I want to do this right," I said. "I don't want him ambushed. I want him to see it clearly." Carl looked at me. "You want him to understand what's happening and why?" "Yes." Carl was quiet a moment, then let him come down. Danny's door opened upstairs at 7:50. I heard his feet on the floor, the bathroom, the water running. Then the smell of the coffee hit him, I think, because his footsteps changed direction, and he came toward the stairs. He came into the kitchen the way he always did, not fully awake, looking for the coffee first, not really seeing the room. He was in a gray t-shirt, jeans, the same boots he'd been wearing for 3 days. He reached past me for a mug without looking at me, poured himself coffee, took a long drink, then he looked at the table, then he looked at me, sitting at the head of it. Something about what he saw made him relax, made that ugly confidence settle in his shoulders. He thought he understood what he was looking at. Old man, good dishes, big breakfast. He thought I'd decided to stop fighting. "Is that Margaret's china?" he said. "It is." "Huh." He set his mug down, pulled out a chair, sat down like he was at a restaurant, reached across and took a waffle without being offered one. "You know what, Gary? Maybe this is actually going to work out." "What is?" "Us." He gestured at the table, the food, some general sense of domestic peace he thought he was walking into. "Maybe you finally figured out that fighting me on everything is just—" He stopped, because he'd finally looked at the table. Really looked. 4 place settings, 3 chairs occupied by people he did not recognize. He straightened. His eyes moved from Hector to Carl to Andrea Solis, then back to me. His face went through several things very quickly. Confusion, calculation, then, underneath both of those, something that looked very much like fear. "Who are these people?" "Friends of mine," I said. "Why are they in your kitchenette?" He stood up from his chair too fast. "What's going on?" Carl spoke first. His voice was even, the way a man's voice gets when he spent 30 years deciding when to be calm. "Danny Colton. My name is Carl Whitmore. I'm a retired law enforcement officer. The woman across from you is Andrea Solis from the Lubbock DA's office." Danny's jaw tightened. He turned to me. "You called the DA?" "I called Carl," I said. "Carl brought Andrea." "What is this?" His voice pitched up. "Gary, what? This is my family. This is a family matter. You don't bring—" "Sit down, son." Hector said it quietly, without heat, and something in the way he said it landed. Because Danny sat, Andrea opened her folder. Mr. Colton, we've reviewed documentation of several incidents that occurred in this home between October of last year and last night. Your uncle has camera footage and a record of events that, taken together, describe a pattern of harassment, threatening behavior, and, based on last night's incident at the bedroom door, what may constitute criminal intimidation under Texas Penal Code. Danny stared at her. Camera footage. That's correct. His eyes went to me. You've been recording me. The camera is in my house, I said. My kitchen. Texas is a one-party consent state. I had every right. His face flushed red. I can't believe. Gary, I'm family. I'm Margaret's. I know who you are, I said. My voice stayed level. It surprised me how level it stayed. You're the boy Margaret helped raise. You're the boy I drove 8 hours to help move into his first apartment. You're the boy I took to his first Rangers game and taught to change a tire on the spare in the Dairy Queen parking lot in Abilene. I paused. And you're the man who has stood in my kitchen for 5 months and used my grief for my wife as a weapon against me. The room was quiet. Danny's mouth was open, but nothing came out. I know you're in pain, I said. I know you lost her too. But grief is not a license. It is not an excuse. And I will not sit in this house and let you use it as one. I reached into my shirt pocket and set my phone on the table, pulled up the oldest clip, pressed play. Danny's voice came out of the small speaker, bourbon thick, from October. Words I'd rather not repeat here. Things he'd said about Margaret. About me. The color left his face. I stopped it. Pulled up November. Played 30 seconds. Carl's jaw was set. Hector was looking at the table. I stopped it again. Pulled up the clip from the worst night in January. Let it play through the part where I tried to leave the kitchen and Danny stepped into the doorway. You can hear me say, I'd like to go to bed now. You can hear him say, we're not done. You can hear the silence after that, 22 seconds of it, which is a long time to listen to a man stand in a doorway deciding whether his 68-year-old uncle is free to leave his own kitchen. I stopped the recording. Andrea had been writing steadily the whole time. Danny put his elbows on the table and put his face in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Gary, I wasn't going to actually. I believe you told yourself that, I said. I told myself the same thing, every time. I folded my hands in front of me. But last night you tried my bedroom door. He didn't answer. You need to go, I said. Today. I want your things out of the guest room by noon. Where am I supposed to? That's not my problem to solve anymore. My voice didn't waver. It hasn't been for a while. I just convinced myself it was. Danny looked at Carl. Carl returned it without expression. He looked at Hector. Hector said, You heard your uncle. Danny looked at me one more time. Something moved through his face that was hard to read. Anger and shame and grief all tangled up, the way things get in people who haven't sorted through themselves in a long time. He stood up. He nodded once, very small. And he went upstairs. Carl stayed until Danny's truck left the driveway. Andrea gave me her card, explained what documentation I should keep, and what options I had going forward if anything escalated. She shook my hand at the door with a firm, professional grip and said, You did the right thing, Mr. Booth. Hector stayed after. We sat on the porch with our coffee in the February cold, the way we used to sit on breaks during long hauls, just two men occupying space together without needing to fill it with words. After a while, Hector said, How do you feel? I thought about it honestly, like I just set down something I'd been carrying so long, I forgot I was carrying it, I said. He nodded. We drank our coffee. The weeks after that were quiet in a way the house hadn't been in a long time. Quiet that felt like rest instead of the kind that felt like waiting. I called Pastor Aldridge and told him the truth. He came over that same week and listened for an hour without offering any advice until I asked for it, which is what you want from a pastor. He connected me with a counselor at the church, a man named Dr. Turfer, Okafor, who specialized in elder care and family dynamics, and I went to see him twice a week for 2 months. The first session, I talked about Margaret for 45 minutes before I ever got to Danny. Dr. Okafor let me. At the end of the session, he said, Grief we don't move through becomes a door other people learn to use. You understand? I understood, My neighbor Connie Marsh brought over a casserole the week after Danny left, which meant word had gotten around, which in a neighborhood like mine means it went around fast and mostly right. She didn't say anything about it directly, just handed me the dish and said, "You look like you could use a hot meal that somebody else made." I appreciated that more than I could tell her. Hector and Roy came by on Saturdays. We'd sit in the garage or the workshop or the porch, and we'd talk about things that mattered and things that didn't, the way old men do when they're lucky enough to have each other. Danny sent a text 6 weeks after he left. Just 3 sentences. Said he'd gone back to Austin. Said he was seeing a counselor. Said he was sorry. I read it 4 times, then set the phone down on Margaret's writing desk and looked at it for a while. I didn't respond that day. Didn't respond the next. On the 3rd day, I sat down at the kitchen table. Margaret's good dishes were back in the cabinet. The camera was still up. And I wrote him back. 1 paragraph. I told him I'd heard him. That sorry was a start, not a finish. That if he kept his word about the counselor and stayed out of the bottle, there might be something to rebuild someday, slowly, on honest ground. That I wasn't giving up on him, but I wasn't taking him at his word yet either. That he'd have to earn it. He wrote back 1 word. Okay, that was enough for now. Here is what I know. Having come through the other side of this, the men of my generation were taught that asking for help was weakness, that what happened in the house stayed in the house, that you protected your own no matter what protecting cost you. I am telling you plainly, that is wrong. I sat in a house and let a person I loved hurt me for months, and I told myself it was protection, and it was love, and it was giving him time, and it was none of those things. It was fear. Fear of being seen, fear of admitting that the boy I'd watched grow up had become someone who could make me lock my own bedroom door in my own house. If there is someone in your life who has you hiding, who has you making excuses, who has you flinching in rooms that belong to you, you are not protecting them. You are shrinking yourself to make space for their damage, and there is a point where that becomes something that cannot be undone. I called 2 people at midnight. It cost me nothing except the story I'd been telling myself about how it wasn't that bad yet. Nothing is more expensive than waiting until it gets that bad. Margaret's camera is still on the kitchen cabinet. I thought about taking it down. Decided to leave it. Not because I'm expecting the worst, but because I'm done pretending the worst can't come, and I'm done being caught without a record of the truth. Her little wooden rooster is still on the windowsill. The ivy dishes are back in the cabinet for special occasions. Her lamp is on the kitchen table. The house still smells like her in the mornings, when the coffee is on and the light comes through the east window just right. And for a few minutes, everything is the way it should be. I'm 68 years old. I built a life worth defending. And I have finally learned how to defend it. If this story found you, it didn't find you by accident. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if you know someone carrying a weight like the one I've been describing, share this with them. They need to know they're not alone.